hello nerds! Thank you for watching Generally Nerdy. This is your week in Nerdom Comic Books Edition, the last video of the week, at least until we bring the supplemental back. This week in comic books, we are talking about Heroes in Crisis number 2. X-Men Black is still giving us those one-offs, and there's a couple other things we're going to hit. Paul Dini, all that jazz, and so much more right after this.
Quiet on the set, rolling.
Hi, I am Bitsy Telek.
Hey, I'm Hale Appleman.
I'm Walter Kane.
I'm Rene Aubergenois. Odo on Deep Space Nine.
Michael Dorn, Lieutenant Commander Worf, Star Trek The Next Generation.
Come and see me and hear me and talk to me and listen to me talk about myself.
Hey man, this is Kevin Smith, often considered generally nerdy, and you are listening to what is often considered generally nerdy.
On Generally Nerdy.
You're listening to
Generally Nerdy.
Generally Nerdy.
Generally nerdy.
First up on the list, Heroes in Crisis number 2 has come out. So if you haven't read it, you can skip forward or you can spoil it. Whatever. It's whatever you want. So we talked a little bit about the last issue, and I've had time to kind of see a couple other perspectives, and still not a huge fan. The artwork is fantastic, but I feel like it's just Tom King is trying to present himself as a lot smarter of a writer than he actually is. Not to throw too much shade on King, but like if you're writing a mystery and you withhold information and then at the end there's a twist that we couldn't have seen coming because you didn't give us the information, that doesn't make you smart, that just makes you good at holding onto a secret. If you want to write a good mystery and you give all of the information and it's just difficult to follow and you are figuring things out along with the characters, that's a completely different story, and that's not what he did with the first book. Though with book 2, we're getting a little bit more of what was promised, though still there's still so much to confound in this book. So the good is that we are getting into the mental health side of things like he was talking about. We get to see the mentality of Booster Gold. We get to see these things happening on the page. But now he may or may not be alluding to the fact that Poison Ivy was also killed in the first book, even though it all happened off panel, and oh man. But it's also potentially, because we get this information through a voiceover, internal monologue, if you will, from Harley Quinn, and it's super vague. It could just be implying that Ivy was hurt. It could be implying that a number of things, but one of the more likely implications is that Ivy died, or at the very least was hospitalized, or something along those lines, in the events of the first book. That just strikes me as so lazy. He does decently in the Batman books, or did decently in the Batman books. I don't like this direction. And it's not because of necessarily what's happening, but it's how it's happening. And it seems so sloppy, and we'll probably continue talking about it because, like I said, this one is a little bit of a step up. It's slightly more enjoyable because we are starting to get those things he promised us before this book started coming out. So the next book will be out the 28th, I believe, of November. So we'll talk about it when it comes out. Next on our list is the next X-Men Black book, which is Emma Frost. Again, spoiler alert, so click forward or whatever, the things. These Black books are setting up a new series, and so far, we talked about Juggernaut last week. We're not going to talk about the Mystique book. Juggernaut was readable, was a good book in spite of the issue that I had with it last week. I don't think I made that clear. It is definitely worth a read. The Frost book is probably somewhere between Juggernaut and Mystique. While the artwork is a little more cartoony than I would have liked, The story starts out okay, and then all of the sudden kind of starts to fall apart, and Emma Frost becomes the Black King, which means she is the leader of the Hellfire Club, because the title has no gender association now, because reasons. It's kind of my reaction to most Marvel anymore, is just So yeah, I mean, read it if you will. I really feel like the series they're setting up has some pretty decent potential, based primarily off of the Juggernaut book, but also this Emma Frost book in parts. So could be great. We'll see when it happens. Right now we're just waiting to get to the end of these one-off books. Next is a little less direct. This is more future news. Paul Dini is doing a team-up book. Kind of. He's being pretty cryptic about what's going to be in the book, aside from who the book is going to involve and how it's going to involve them and all that jazz. Super duper up in the air. Right now, what we do know is that it's going to have Poison Ivy, Magpie, Baby Doll, and March Hare. And that's, again, all we really know. It sounds like it's going to be a book in and of itself, though he didn't say that, so it could be this group of mostly villains, because Ivy kind of sometimes is sort of an anti-hero, and the other ones are kind of obscure, so we don't see them very often. But they could be teaming up against Batman, theoretically. Again, it kind of sounds like he's selling it as this is the book. It's centered around these 4 characters, which could be good, though we know from the Harley Quinn book that that's not entirely always the case, because, yeah. So on his Instagram, the only thing he's actually said is that the project is coming soon, and as more starts coming out about this, we'll definitely be talking about it. But that's all we have right now. So let's move on to the last bit of comic book news this week. Actually, I got one little quick update. Wolverine the Long Night. I was going to wait until the last episode came out on iTunes, because, again, all 10 episodes are already on Stitcher. Episode 9 just came out this week, and, well, by the time this is on, episode 10 will have been out, and I'll know exactly how it ends. But I love the idea behind The Long Night. I think that comic books as audio plays is a fantastic thing. Comic books as audio play should have been a thing as soon as podcasting was popular. Someone should have said, hey, we can do this with comic books. I'm not putting down this series at all, so whatever I'm about to say, please don't misread that as I don't like it, because it is very well voice acted. It's pretty well written. It's not the best writing ever, because they kind of show their hand really, really early on, and it's a murder mystery. It's definitely a whodunit that for a while they want you to think that maybe it was Wolverine that killed these people. They show their hand, but we'll get into that in a second. The weirdest thing about this, and the thing that kind of takes you out of it, is being that this is a book about a mutant, and this is a book that is presumably set in a modern continuity, in a modern time, in a world where, again, we can presume that they know what mutants are. They don't reference the fact that Wolverine is a mutant until the 8th episode, and there's only 10 episodes. So that was really weird, and the fact that everyone seemed baffled when they're recounting, because you don't actually hear from Wolverine so far, and I've listened to the nine of the 10 episodes. You don't hear from Wolverine directly at all. Maybe you do in the last episode. I won't know until this is posted. But people are baffled by his claws, and and his ability to heal even seems to throw them for a loop. Like they've never heard of mutant. Like you can have a show about mutants and not use that word often. Sure, that's doable. But if you were in a world where mutants exist, like the Marvel Universe, then it shouldn't be as much of a surprise when somebody has mutant abilities or is a little different. Yes, that then creates a different storytelling style where you're using mutation as allegory for back when X-Men was first popular. It was allegory for civil rights, and then in the 90s up through today, the X factor, the X gene, is more of an allegory for gay rights, LGBTQ, so on and so forth. I can see that, even though that's been done a million freaking times. This is a new medium. It just was a little off-putting. It takes you out of the story a little bit when all of these people who are recounting stories of having run into Wolverine, and then they see his claws, or they see how strong he is, or they see him heal, and they're like, "Oh, I've never seen anything like that before." Yeah, you have. You really, really have. You're a Marvel character. You've seen stuff like that in the news daily. But again, otherwise, it is an amazing piece of audio art, and I definitely recommend everybody listening to it. Just going into it knowing that little element is a little off-putting. But anyway, let's get into our last bit of actual news. Wolverine the Vigil is what we're talking about here. So Charles Soule, who is writing The Return of Wolverine, is going to give us another Wolverine book once Return is done, and I believe it's just an 8-issue arc, so it's going to be soon-ish. Once that's done, he's going to be giving us The Vigil, which is going to be a 12-issue story arc. And it's going to be spanning decades in the life of Wolverine, starting at World War I, and then presumably bringing him to current, potentially even a future or something like that. But I know what you're saying, because I said the exact same thing when I was reading this. We've done this. This is familiar ground multiple times over. Yes, absolutely, totally agree. Why would we do this? Well, Soule said, and this is a quasi-quote, Soule said that it's going to be dark, almost a fantasy or a horror movie. So yes, it does take place in these familiar eras of Wolverine's life, but it's a different spin on it. And I feel like that could be fantastic. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit. Last week we talked about the second issue of The Return of Wolverine. It's not as horrible as I kind of made it sound. I still think it's silly. I still think his hot claws is silly, but the issue reads well. It is the artwork is not bad. It's definitely not great, but it's also not bad. I heard somebody review it since we talked about this last week. I heard somebody review it, and they called it a good comic book version of an 80s action movie, and that is probably the best description of that. It's really shallow. It's a lot of cool things are meant to be happening on screen, though that's kind of debatable. And the dialogue doesn't lose you, and you get to see these familiar faces, and all of this really interesting stuff is going on. But then you have the silly bits, and it's all very superficial. So that's kind of what I was trying to relay last week when we were talking about the silliness. Anyway, so yeah, Vigil is going to be the next Wolverine book, and that is where we're ending this week's comic books episode, guys. What did I miss all across the nerddom? Let me know in the comments down low. What should we talk about next week? Let's have that conversation down low in the comments. If though you want to go deeper into the conversation, jump over to the website generallynerdy.net. that is the place that you can get all the freebies, the social media links, the links to the nerdy stores so you can get your nerdy swag. All of that is over on the website, generallynerdy.net. There's also a Patreon page if you want to go support the channel more directly and also get more content. Patreon.com/generallynerdy. That's where you can go. 4 tiers. Everybody knows how Patreon works. Go check mine out. Just $1 and you get more content. So I really appreciate everyone who is over. And as the list starts growing, we will definitely add a section into every video. Dealing more directly with patrons, but right now it's not a very big list, so go check it out. Go see all of the extra content that is up on patreon.com/generallynerdy. If you are new to this channel though, click the subscribe button. If you like this episode, click the like button. If you are falling behind in your nerd news and you want to catch up, click or tap that box right there to the left of my face to do that. But before we go anywhere and do anything, guys, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.